Well, so on both sides of my family, I have grandfathers who fought for the Union Army. They both mustered out of Southern Illinois. On my mom's side, it's a guy named Alex Jordan. I'm not named after him.
It just happens to
Yeah.
us.
I think he's my sixth great grandpa. And I think they mustered out of Tams. And then on my father's side, it was James Dillon. And I think he mustered out of Benton, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he's also my sixth great grandpa. But yeah, they settled here before the Civil War and got kind of pulled into the conflict. And I've had family here ever since, so our blood is in the soil and our bones.
Oh man, like, are there stories that you've grown up with that like pin on generations of folks, from your family within Southern Illinois? Like, oh, well, we remember the Burger Gang stuff. Like, so when you guys do stuff like, an entire Charlie Burger album, you're like, oh, I got a little connection there.
Yeah. I don't know of any direct connection with my family with the Burgers or the Sheltons or any of them. But my grandmother owned a nursing home, and there was an old guy there when I was in high school who I was talking to, and he was like, Charlie Burger was a good man. A lot of people said he was bad, but he was a good man, and he dropped off food at my family's house. He was telling all these kind of Robin Hood stories about him and stuff, and I always thought that was kind of interesting, and that was when I was first finding out who Charlie Burger was, because I didn't really know until I was in high school, But, yeah, I mean, my great-grandparents on my dad's side, I've seen pictures of them during the Great Depression. And my grandma, Dorothy, she was maybe 2 or 3 years old in these pictures, and she was wearing a dress made out of a flour sack that my great-grandma had made for her because they were so poor, as farmers. I remember my grandma hated fish. She did not like to eat fish, and I think it was because during the Depression, that was one of their only sources of food. So my great-grandpa would go out and catch any kind of fish he could catch.
Yeah, just whatever was there.
Catfish, carp, whatever it was, and they had to eat fish all the time. And I guess back then, a lot of the forests in Southern Illinois had been cut down. There's a lot more forestation now than there was then. And so the pictures that I see of them, it's just like them on a dirt hill with this cabin and this metal roof, and they're all wearing homemade clothes, and their farm was dust bowled, so they couldn't grow any food. And yeah, it's really something to think that all that happened right here. There's a fellow named Sam Stearns who's a environmentalist here in Southern Illinois, and he was telling me that Southern Illinois lost about 10 feet of topsoil during the Dust Bowl. If you can just imagine it, like as tall as a basketball goal, that much topsoil gone into the rivers and streams and stuff. It's crazy how it just all blew away.
Well, and we're in the area, right, where, however many millions of years ago, where the ocean used to meet the land, right? The reason why we've got such fertile land around here is just because of, the earth and how it has evolved over millions of years. So to lose something that valuable, I mean, it's not as if, Southern Illinois farmland is incapable of growing things, but imagine what it would be like if we hadn't lost all of that in such a rapid
It seems like most
time.
of the fertile ground we have too is, this very southern tip where the floodplains used to be and along the rivers and things like that. Because, I mean, I think technically, geologically speaking, we're a part of the Ozarks. So it's really rocky, rough terrain, not too great for row cropping or whatever, But, yeah, it's an interesting place for sure.
Does some of this connection to the land through your family like guide your love and your interest for the forest and for just kind of like, hands in the dirt kind of mentality?
I think it provides some kind of emotional connection, I would say, but I've gradually learned about this family history thing here over my adult life, so really my love for the forest and the lakes and the rivers and everything around here, the natural environment of Southern Illinois really just comes from my childhood where, we didn't have very much money, and my dad would just take us on the weekend, we'd hop in his truck and he would like drive us up to Bald Knob or drive us out to Pine Ridge. We'd go to Inspiration Point. The state forest. All kinds of places. Pine Hills, we used to go there a lot. Giant City. We'd go to Pomona Natural Bridge and then stop at the little general store there and get like milkshakes and stuff. Like, that was just what we did. And he took us fishing a lot. So I just kind of grew up that way, So now anytime I'm back here, just floods of nostalgia and, it's funny. All the happy childhood memories come flooding back.
Well, that is the perfect break in to, kind of talk about what we might get into on this, the 119th episode of the WTF Carbondale podcast, where we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives, and we tie it all back to this little old place we call home, Carbondale, Illinois. The interesting person in this episode, of course, Alex Kirt, of the Woodbox Gang fame, but of many other fames throughout the course of life as you've become. I'm excited to learn about the jaunt to Missouri and your later in life growth into Professor Kirt. Yep. but I'm thrilled to hear like just where the fond memories and the connection to Southern Illinois really come into, just kind of like let's say gallivanting around Southern Illinois with Dad.
Yep.
Was he part of your like first early interactions with Carbondale as a place as well?
Yeah. He and my mom would bring us up here and we would watch movies at the Varsity Theater. I remember seeing Star Wars, not the first one, but I think we saw that at a drive-in movie theater actually. But I remember seeing Empire Strikes Back. I remember seeing Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think we may have even seen Return of the Jedi there. Like all the movies that were out, I was a kid in the 80s, so all that kind of stuff. Goonies, I think I remember seeing that there. But yeah, and then, as I got older and was out of high school, then all the Tarantino stuff started coming out, and I saw some of that there. And I remember I saw Pulp Fiction there. I saw American History X there. I saw Forrest Gump there. Like,
man, now I'm really glad that I wore the varsity shirt for this interview. That's great.
That was a big part of what we did, And back then, going to the movie theater didn't cost very much money. So, but we would do that quite a bit. And there was a video rental store up here. And we used to rent VHS tapes. Like we'd have family pizza movie nights on Fridays. So we'd like drive up here and get some pizza, and each one of us would pick out a movie, and then we go home and watch movies and eat pizzas. And so that kind of stuff, my mom would bring us up here to buy school clothes and things like that. But I didn't really get involved in the music scene up here until I was in high school. And I was in a band called Soul Dog, and we played at Gatsby's quite a bit. Robbie Stokes actually kind of took us on. He was sort of our booking agent. And he booked us at Gatsby's and Sidetracks, and I can't even think. We played some frat parties even. But we were like a grunge band, like I think we really modeled ourselves after like Alice in Chains. I know that was my favorite band at the time. even though, you know, I'm in the Woodbox Gang
Yeah.
and I do like playing Americana music, I'm a rocker at heart.
Yeah.
Like, I was a rock band guy, you know, and so we did that and started to do pretty well, and then we won a battle of the bands, and when that happened, Sally at the hangar started booking us at the hangar, and we did that, gosh, until the band broke up, which was a few years later.
Yeah.
And then years after that, when we got the Woodbox Gang together, you know, we kind of did the same thing where we played coffee shops, and then we would do like PKs and Tres Hombres and stuff like that, and then eventually we were able to draw a big enough crowd to play at the hangar. So I've gone through the progression twice.
And it's almost like it's all right. We're gonna do one more run at this in a very different way now that we're adults.
Yeah.
Is it just like having a lot of core memories around media and whatnot in the varsity? What's it feel like showing up to the big room and like playing a concert in a place where you have a very different subset of memories attached to family and media and other stuff?
It's interesting. Like, as soon as I walked in there, I started remembering watching movies there. You know? Like, I wanted to smell popcorn, you know? But yeah, I thought about that as soon as I walked in. And then I think I even said something about it at the show. Like, I saw Pulp Fiction and Forrest Gump in here or something like that. But yeah, that immediately came back to me. But that's maybe the third or fourth time I've played in the varsity.
Yeah. It's you guys have done a handful of times.
Like, I played there solo, and then we played there with my other band, the Giant City Slickers. And I think my band with Dan Gett and Nate Graham that was called the Django Billies, I think we played there once too, but it wasn't in the big room.
Probably
I think it was
upstairs in the balcony,
smaller
or
room.
potentially in the East Theater.
Yeah.
Depending on what year and what series of things were going on at the time.
All this stuff was probably between 2010 and 2017, like somewhere in that period of time. Aside from the most recent one, of course. But yeah. Been a few times, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. I love that place, you know, and I love that it's right on the strip in town. You know, it's a great location.
Yeah, no, I mean it's kind of that center to reviving all the old school like Carbondale energy that we know is here. We just gotta pull it up from the roots and spread it around and go, hey guys, we're
all my hippie friends say that there's these vortexes around here. Is that the plural of vortex?
Yeah.
Is it vortices? I don't know. I don't teach English.
Yeah.
But yeah, apparently there's a bunch of those around here, and I don't know really what that means. But if it means hot, humid summers, probably true.
Well, I think of it. I think of Carbondale in the sense of kind of like, I watched a documentary on Muscle Shoals one time where they talked about Muscle Shoals as being next to this river, and there was something about the river and the music and just the energy of the place, right? And I always wonder, okay, is Carbondale kind of one of those places too? We're in this valley around this place, in between these rivers, next to this water and these forests, and it's like, is there just something here that's always been here, and there's nothing really... You know, we just happen to be the folks manifesting whatever it is in the modern moment, but long before we were here and long after we're gone, whatever that energy is will always be here, and it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. It's you know, I think the whole river, land between the rivers thing is the reason why they called it Little Egypt. There seems to be some argument about that among the historians and stuff, but it just makes sense to me, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and then you start naming places after places, you know, over there, and all of a sudden
Cairo
it's like,
instead of Cairo.
Yeah, and we will always, you know, it's funny when I talk to anybody from, you know, from out of town, and we talk about, you know, the way that we pronounce things around here, and they're like, they pronounce something one way. We're like, no. You're gonna need to bring it back from the Queen's English into Southern Illinois.
It's
English
not
here.
El Dorado. It's El Dorado. Potato.
Oh man, that is phenomenal. How do you feel like? Because we talked a little bit as we were getting ready for the interview here about raising kids and all that fun stuff. Do you feel like the upbringing that your parents provided you is something that's really helped drive the way that you parent too, and kind of the experiences you're able to share with your kids as they're growing older? Like,
Yeah, I definitely learned how to be a parent from my parents. I think probably most people do, especially if they even, you know what, I was going to say if they had a good childhood like I did, but I think even people who have a bad childhood learn. Like, so I've known people who've had bad childhoods who became really good parents because they were just like, I'm not going to be like that.
That's it. You can either learn what to do or what not to do.
Yeah.
Pick one.
But for me, it was just like my parents, they devoted themselves to our family the whole time we were growing up. I mean, they were always looking for stuff to do with us and spent a lot of time with us, and so my wife and I do the same thing with our kids. Like, we do stuff with them all the time.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy it. And, like, there's always that part of you, and especially when your kids are really young, where you're like, I can't wait for them to grow up and stop doing this thing that's annoying me, but I can already tell as my daughter's 13 and my son's 15 now, and I can already tell it's only going to be a handful of years before they're both adults, and then I'm going to be like, oh, I wish they would come home, you don't think that when your kid's like 3 or 4 and you're like, every time they go to the bathroom, I'm in charge. Like, you get tired of that, or they can't eat without my help, they can't get dressed without my help. Like, you get tired of that. And it's good that doesn't last any longer than it does,
I'm a fan of parenting the bigger children.
Yeah,
yeah.
But there's something to be
8 or 9.
said for the times when they're little and they crawl up on your lap and watch cartoons with you and stuff like that, You definitely miss those things, and I think that's why grandparents are so affectionate with their grandchildren a lot of times, because that you miss that,
Yeah.
But we're buddies now, and we go to concerts. I take my kids to concerts as much as I can, and I just took them to see the Melvins and Napalm Death before we came to Southern Illinois.
Oh, buddy!
Because they like heavy rock.
All right, I was gonna say, so they're little metalheads themselves.
Yeah, and they really like '90s music, like like the Melvins. My daughter's really into Nirvana and Soundgarden and Alice in Chains. My son likes Soundgarden and Alice in Chains, and they both like Metallica. My daughter really likes Slipknot. It's all this 80s and 90s stuff, like newer bands. My son likes King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, I think, is probably his favorite.
That sounds so familiar.
Yeah, they've been around for quite a while. I think they came out maybe 2012 or 13, something like that. But they're from Australia. We saw them twice in concert. Once we saw them at Red Rocks Amphitheater with my buddy Dan Gett, who plays in the Woodbox Gang with me. That was an amazing concert. And then we went and saw them at this amphitheater in Omaha, Nebraska. It was just my son and I at that one. And both times, just stellar show. And what I really love about them is you can't pin them down into a genre. Every single album, I think, is intentionally a complete shift. They're just trying things out. You could tell they just have this genuine love for being creative with each other. I mean, they put out an album that was all analog synthesizers. I mean, and then one of them was straight up 80s thrash metal, and the other one's like jam bandy stuff. One of them's kind of folky stuff. Like, I think the most recent one that I can think of, it was like pretty much a classic rock album. It's like something different every time. It's really interesting. It just seems like music in general we're almost in a post-genre world now. I've heard some other people say that too, but I really kind of think that it's getting that way for sure.
Well, the way that I view media in the modern era, right? And it helps being in the position like we are, having these teenage kids, getting to watch them cycle back to a catalog of what feels like infinite media that they can reference and go, this suits me, that suits me, right? It wasn't like in the 50s they were hearkening back to the 20s. It wasn't like in the 80s they were hearkening back to the 50s. It wasn't like in the early 2000s they were looking at the 1970s and going, well, where's my parody and all this? But now, right, where we live in a world of great saturation and even greater access, right? It's almost more the art of discovery and taste making aligns more than the creation of something new, because we've done. I mean, I don't know. I'm not the sound and and music and other things professor here. So correct me where I'm wrong. But like, at some point in time, we've got to exhaust all of the different types of music that we could potentially make and all the different types of ways that we could make it.
Yeah. It seems like curation is more important than originality nowadays. Where, like with the hip hop stuff that came out in the 80s, when I was a kid, it was people playing, break beats off of disco records and stuff, and then rapping over the top of it, and it got more and more and more elaborate, people mixing all this stuff together. And, you got albums like Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique, with just so many samples on there. It's curation. It's a musical mosaic. It's definitely its own art form, but that, I think, has become maybe more prevalent in music now than people just sitting down with a guitar and writing a song. But I have noticed that the younger generation, like the ones who are maybe high school age right now and middle schoolers, seem to be getting more interested in instruments again. Whereas the ones who are in college right now, I've noticed that there's not usually very many bands. Yeah. Like somebody might say, oh, I'm a DJ or something like that. But I have had very few students. I've been teaching now for 8 years. Yeah. And I really haven't had students come in and say, yeah, we have a band and I want to bring my band in and record in the studio, which surprises me, because when I was their age, here's my old man thing, when I was their age, there were a bunch of bands. Everybody had a band. You go to a house party in college, there's a band, but now they've got a Bluetooth speaker, but there's still people like curating things and stuff like that. But, it's just more of a curation thing than I think. I don't want to say curation versus creativity, because curating is creative. Yeah, absolutely. It's just a different way of doing it. And I think that it requires just as much skill as mastering an instrument, but it's a different set of skills in a lot of ways. Like recording, it's recording. You know what I mean? Like whether you're using samples and just recording voices or whatever, I mean, there's certain skills that you need to have to mix and things like that. And, you need to practice miking a drum set and miking acoustic guitars and things like that. But it's still this, you're using the same software, the same kind of techniques work for different things, so it's like, it's still in the same realm of art, I guess, it's just a little different. But, one of the big criticisms that I hear of that stuff is people say, well, they're just taking other people's music and taking little snips of it and gluing it all together like a puzzle, and that's not original. And I'm like, well, if you really think about it, no musician that I know of has completely invented anything. Yeah, absolutely. Just like no scientist that I know has completely invented anything, and no painter. You know what I mean? You learn from what came before you, and then you innovate and do your own thing with it, you know?
Yep.
So in a way, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just, if somebody hands you an instrument, it's not you. Maybe you can't play it, but if somebody hands you a laptop and an interface, you might be able to make amazing music with it. You know, it's just, I don't know, the instrument. It's 2025 for God's sake. You know what I mean? Like, things change. You know what I mean? The way we create is always different, but like nothing is completely original. You know, like human invention and innovation. You know, it relies on the things that came before.
Yeah.
You know, and it's that way with everything. Like, imagine if you were going to design a car, and you were like, I'm not going to use any invention that anybody else invented before. So what are you going to do? There's no wheel,
Yeah.
no internal combustion, no battery. You know what I mean? Like, that's stupid.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And you can't expect musicians to do that either. You know, I mean, you know, even the classical guys built upon what came before them.
Yeah.
You know, it's always been that way. I can't think of any part of human life that doesn't do that. You know what I mean? So I'm not offended by the stuff. Now, am I a huge fan of, you know, Doja Cat or no? But that one song she had was pretty cool, you know? But like, you know, it just, I don't know. Some people just get real defensive about it. You know what I mean? And I kind of think it's ridiculous to be defensive about just the natural progression of human creativity, you know?
And there's something to be said for the concept of the contemporary, right? Like, it's one thing to listen to, you know, a track from the 1950s or 60s or what have you, right, in its own right. But to do some type of mastering or blending into something modern and to share it with, you know, in a peer setting, right? Folks that are around the same age, around the same taste, whatever that may be, right? There will always be a need for that, right?
Yeah.
Because humans are sharing with other humans that exist in the same space as they are. You can't necessarily go back to that environment or that place where people were many years ago and say, oh, well, I'm participating in this space now. That's not how time works, right? Like, you can only ever exist and participate in the contemporary because that is the time in which you as an individual exists.
Yeah.
Right. So that to me makes sense. Like, okay, when do we start as a creative, what's the word that I'm looking for here? Use your brain. Species. Yeah, species would be a good enough word for now. As a creative species, like, look at this and go, okay, cool. Yeah, we're using things from the past, but it matters because it's in the contemporary.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. And, you know, going back to that whole idea of it being a post-genre sort of world right now, I think my band fits into that. Like, I think the Woodbox Gang fits into it because we don't have a genre.
Yeah.
Like, and it's kind of reflective, I think, of the way that I don't think either Hugh nor I have ever fit into any kind of little social category.
Yeah.
You know, I liked heavy rock and metal and stuff, but I also liked Muddy Waters and Robert Johnson and Hank Williams and all this other stuff. And I just liked what I liked, and I didn't really care.
Yeah.
And I didn't really, you know, when I was a teenager, I kind of tried to do this thing where I was like, oh yeah, we're going to wear leather jackets and band shirts and tight jeans and combat boots, you know, or flannels or whatever. But like, you know, when I became an adult, I just was like, I'm just going to be me. I'm going to dress the way I dress. I'm going to play whatever kind of comes out of me, you know. And I kind of got this idea probably in 99 that I really wanted to start a jug band, you know, because I really, really like the music of the 20s and 30s and 40s. And I was like, I'm going to borrow from that.
Yeah.
That sound, you know, that kind of instrumentation. But I don't want to be a jug band that plays 1920s jug band hits.
Yeah.
You know, like I wanted a band that like basically had topically modern songs. And I had known Hugh for a while by then, you know, and I just hit him up with the idea. And he was like, we already have a band. Why don't you just come play with us and we'll do it? And I was like, all right. So that's when I started playing with those guys. But I think this whole time we're not really an Americana band. We're not a country band. We're not a blues band. We're not a rock band. We're not a punk band. You know, we're just us.
Yeah.
You know, and you can hear every single album. You can kind of tell what kind of music some of us were listening to during that period of time. You know, like for example, whenever we made that Drunk as Dragons album, I was like obsessed with like the golden era of reggae and the, you know, like 60s and 70s reggae, and listen to it. I drove the guys crazy because we'd be driving around like listening to, you know, the Ethiopians or, you know, Scratch Perry or something like that, Augustus Pablo, you know, and I think they got sick and tired of hearing it. But I was like, man, we can use this kind of a beat with our song and, you know, a couple of songs or something like that. And we did. And I messed around with those styles of vocal harmonies and things like that. And, you know, but there's other times where, you know, the songs kind of, you're like, man, this is like an acoustic punk song, or, you know, wow, this really reminds me of like 1950s country, or, you know, you can hear those little influences in there, but I think it always sounds like us, and we don't really fit into any genre, just like we don't really fit into any social categories in society either. You know, we're just Hugh and I we're just a couple of weirdos, you know. It's just the way it is. Maybe that's why we hit it off, you know. Dude's like a brother to me now, you know. We've been through the world together.
It's no doubt, man. I mean, through everything you could possibly imagine.
Yep.
In where you guys are today, it was really heartening just kind of listening to Hugh talk on his podcast, you know, talking about you know, what he felt he owed to you guys as bandmates, and, you know, why the work that you guys are putting in now is so important. You know, not necessarily just to him as an individual, right, but for him to feel like he's putting back into these folks that have you know, provided him so much in life. And I mean, you guys have lived a freaking story, man.
Yeah, we have. You know, I mean, when we first started writing songs together, I mean, we were just doing it for the love of doing it, you know. No real aspirations or anything like that. And, you know, that's kind of how the band started out, really, for me. I was, you know, I had a job and was doing my thing, and I was just like, I want to play music with Hugh. I want to write songs with him, you know. And I just thought we were too weird and too unmarketable to, like, ever really get any attention or anything. But it was just so much fun. It was so creatively satisfying, you know, that we just kept doing it. And then all of a sudden it was like, people like this. Some people like this. Some people hate it, but some people like it.
Some people really like it.
Yeah. It's funny. There have been times, though, like, I remember this one time we played in New York City at the Knitting Factory, and we opened for this folk singer named Lanky, or no, he opened for us. And he's actually, I think he's famous now. But I mean, he was like a New York City folk guy, like very, very different than us.
Yeah.
You know, he was very gentle, I should say. Like his style was very gentle. And, you know, there were all these people there. Like the room was full of people, and they're all just folk swaying and just loving it. And I was like, wait till they get a load of us, you know. And we got up there and played and emptied the room. Like the only people in the room still were the bartender, the doorman, and Mike Lascelius, who was there recording the show. Like everybody else left. And the doorman was just like, hey, man, you guys can quit whenever you want. You know, we were like, well, let's play a few more since we're recording, you know. But I think we got $3 because I think, I just remembered. I think Julie Summer came. She sang on let me think, Never Kissed a Girl, and I think Family Night. She sang on some of our recordings and stuff. Old friend of ours, but she actually came to the show. I think it was like she paid like $3 to get in. So that was the only money that we made for playing in New York City in Manhattan. Yeah, it was pretty hilarious. But, you know, so, I mean, I guess the whole point of the story is there are some people who really like what we do, and then there's people who just absolutely hate it. And I think, actually, the people in New York just were, like, culturally shocked by us, you know.
Well, when you don't expect to be Woodbox ganged, right?
Yeah.
Like it can be a big jump, and I would imagine like your guys' energy in that time was just like full on.
Yeah, we were way younger, and full of piss and vinegar, and it was definitely in your face. But man, they were out. They bailed. They couldn't take it. But we found another place called the Rodeo Bar, which is really, it might even still be there. It's in Manhattan, I think, but it's kind of a kitschy type place, I guess you could say. It's kind of a gimmick. They had a horse trailer inside the bar with the side down, and the bartender stood inside the horse trailer, like serving drinks out of the side of this horse trailer.
Rodeo is in quotation marks.
Right.
For the bar. Got it.
And like the bar stools all had saddles on them. You know, it was like that kind of thing. So they booked country, western, Americana, bluegrass, stuff like that in there all the time. So people came there with that in mind. So we had a lot more success in that bar than we did at the Knitting Factory, for sure. The people who came there bought our CDs and liked us, you know, whereas, I don't know, I guess it just took us playing in New York a few times to actually find a place. Because, man, you know, New York is so big.
Yeah.
I mean, there's every kind of person there, you know.
And you can stumble into all the wrong rooms.
Yep. But I tell you what, it felt really weird playing in New York City, though. So for one thing, we looked online and we could not find a hotel room that we could afford that also had a place for our van and trailer to park. Yeah. And I was like, man, we're going to get robbed. And, you know, so we stopped in Bear Mountain State Park across the river. There's bears there. Yeah. Like they have bear-proof trash cans and stuff. It's right across the river from New York. It's this big forest. So we got a campsite there. It was like $16 a night. And we just pulled in there, unhooked our trailer, put the gear that we needed in the van, because if you pull a trailer across the bridge or go through the tunnel, it's like this massive toll that you have to pay to get into the city. So we put what we needed in the van and just drove that over there, played the gig in Manhattan, turned around and camped out. And a hurricane came rolling up the coast and hit while we were in our tents. And when we woke up in the morning, it was just like piss and rain. And there was like knee-deep water in the campground. And I remember I was laying on like one of those Thermarest mattresses in my sleeping bag. And it was just pouring rain. I was like, well, I think we had to drive to like Hartford, Connecticut the next day or something. And I was like, oh, I better see if everybody's up, And whenever I put my hand down on the floor of the tent, it was like whoosh, whoosh, like a water bed. Because my tent had like a tarp floor on it, so it didn't leak. Because it was a brand new Walmart tent. It hadn't had time to break
there
yet.
You go.
And I like push on it, and it was just like a water bed. So I like sloshed over and like barely unzipped. I was like, hey, are you guys awake? And they were like, my tent's flooded. My sleeping bag's wet. So we like threw all of our wet stuff in the trailer, drove to Hartford, Connecticut, and then we went into a laundromat and like throwing all of our tents and the dryers and stuff in there. And this lady came out. She's like, you can't put those plastic tents in my dryers. It was this whole deal, but big adventure, Pretty hilarious. Yeah, it's big days in New York City.
Just how long were you guys on the road for?
It kind of depended. Like, sometimes we would just do like short weekend trips. Other times we'd be gone for a week, sometimes 3 weeks. I think the longest one we went on continuously was like 9 weeks. And I believe on that one, it was like, geez, where all did we go on that trip? There's no way I can remember it all, but it was like, I know we like were in Colorado, Montana, Idaho, Washington State. I think we played in Seattle, Oregon, California, Utah. It was a really long loop that we went on, and we would do these things where we would base tours around anchor gigs, we called them, where you'd have your Friday, Saturday night type stuff, festivals usually paid really good, or like a big night in a college town or something like that. I always found that clubs in college towns usually were more receptive to us, but also paid a lot better than if you play in the big city. Because in the big city, there's so much competition for entertainment.
Oh, yeah.
It's really hard for anybody to think you're worth anything, money-wise. So it's like we would play, or we would book these big anchor gigs that would give us, a lot of money. And then, I guess you could say a lot of money relatively speaking. But, and then we would just fill in between, with these smaller shows. And
quick breaking question, because it's at the top of my mind. Was coming up in Carbondale and being able to see how folks like a Robbie or a Sally or the university or whatever else may operate, like give you guys just enough insight to be like, oh, here's how we might navigate our travels around the country? Or was it not even applicable? You guys just kind of went at it?
I think we were pretty much clueless. Okay. Like we tried to use common sense, but that failed us many times. Like none of us had experience at all. And we ended up doing it ourselves for a little while, and then we hired Phil Simon from Simon Says Booking to be our booking agent, and he really made us be a national act.
Now, this was the guy that flew in to check out you guys and another act, and he was like, pay for my hotel, one of you pay for my food, one of you pay for my hotel. And,
yeah, we flew him out here, and he checked us out and took us on his roster. And he really kept us busy. And, back then, I remember I got a BlackBerry. You remember those things?
Yeah.
I got a BlackBerry maybe a year or two after he started working with us, and like that was before the iPhone came out, you know. And so I had this BlackBerry, and like we played at a venue near his house, and he had us come and stay at his house, and he saw that he was like, "You have a BlackBerry?" Because he just, I just don't think that he thought that I would be that tech savvy or something. I remember him like laughing about it, that it was really funny that I had this BlackBerry, But, so back then anyway, it was a little more difficult to keep in touch while we were on the road. I remember still using pay phones occasionally, But he would send us emails, and I would have a laptop with me. And when we got into the hotel, I would physically plug into their Ethernet port and check the emails that he'd sent me, and it would be like gig offers. And sometimes he would throw a show in here or there, like in the middle of our tour, you know. But I mean, back then we were like printing off all of our directions from MapQuest, and we had a big laminated United States Road Atlas in the van, and it was like right at the end of our touring time whenever we finally got a GPS. It was like a dash-mounted GPS that actually got stolen during my wedding reception in Chicago. Somebody busted the window out of the van and stole the GPS off the dash.
Just for the GPS?
Yeah. And you know what's funny? Our whole PA and a bunch of our instruments and stuff were in the back because my band played at my wedding reception. So they didn't take any of our equipment. All they did was steal the GPS. It was like,
call it a win, man.
Yeah.
Listen, there wasn't going to be somebody that came by for a quick lift that thought they were going to take all your gear with them too.
And luckily it was still September, so it was warm enough out that my friend who had been kind enough to drive the van full of equipment to Chicago from Carbondale, he had to drive back with the window busted out of one side.
Man.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about the emails and the BlackBerry and stuff because one of the things that I find very interesting about the Woodbox Gang is almost like the chronicling of the development of the modern socialized internet, right?
Yeah.
That like your guys' understanding and engagement with technology is reflected in the work that you guys produce as musicians. Was that just kind of something you guys stumbled into, like, oh, this is part of our lives, so this is kind of...
Yeah, definitely. Like, I don't think Hugh or I ever really wanted to play hot cold corn, bring along a demijohn, the old, that kind of stuff. Like, we kind of wanted our songs to be about stuff that was going on now for the most part. So aside from that Charlie Berger album, and there's been some stuff where Hugh has written songs that were inspired by or based on old stories, like on our new album, there's the song called Claudia and Elsie that's based on a story that Barney Bush had published in Springhouse magazine. And there's some instances like that, but like we had like the Italian plumber lawsuit, like on our first record, and it was talking about, people were saying that video games caused violence, which has been disproven many, many times over now, but they were saying that. And so Hugh, having the brain that he has, just came up with this really clever, hilarious thing where it was like, well, really, it's Mario Brothers. Because then he started pointing out all the violence in Mario Brothers, this cute little cartoony video game, and, he's like stomping on flowers and kicking turtles and, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like not only violent, but it's violent towards nature, And I'm like, who would kick a turtle? You know what I mean? Mario would kick a turtle. You know what I mean? But yeah. So that kind of thing, and there's been quite a few others, and also, there's like Hugh has a affinity for gambling and risk taking in many ways, and so he's got that theme kind of in a few different songs, there's also some things talking about the internet and different things like that. There was like that song, the .com machine, and that one was about like a child predator getting busted on the internet, and that was written a long time ago. There weren't really any safeguards on the internet at that time that I remember, So, I mean, he made this thing about it where it's like this pathetic loser got caught trying to hook up with a 13-year-old girl on the internet or whatever, and the cops busted him, and it kind of, I don't know. I don't want to say it made light of it, but, it was kind of a comical song, I think.
Well, I mean, any
about
more,
a dark subject.
And it's that I overheard my one of my kids listening to some of the Predator Hunter type content out there now, and I saw something come through even my feed the other day about some creator that does this busting pedophiles type stuff where he shot up a guy with a paintball gun 120 times, and it's like, listen, that is as real and applicable, right? The Chris Hansons of the world and all that other stuff. Like, it just so happens that Hugh wrote a song about this before it was ever a thing that broader society understood and had blended into their psyche, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that gets me on to like the concept of like, you guys make timeless music, right? There's just something about what you guys have produced over what he said, like 9 albums, something like that you guys are at now.
It sounds about right. There were some live albums too that I don't really know if we count or not. I think sometimes we count them and sometimes we don't. I don't know.
Hey, call
Studio
it,
albums.
yeah, 6 written, 9 recorded, whatever
like
it may be, right? But there's something in the stories that you guys have unearthed and brought to life, through the music that you play, that just are forever relevant, right? They are consistently contemporary in this modern day. And I don't know, does that, in your guys' writing style, I mean, is it one person's doing music, one person's doing lyrics, or how does your guys' the creative process come together? I guess
it's been done many ways. Over the years, we've tried a whole bunch of different ways and experimented with different ways of doing things, I mean, at the beginning, I came in and Hugh already had all these songs written. Mm-hmm. And then I just kind of was like, well, what about this and what about that, and kind of just added in vocal harmonies or made up some melodic part to go along with it or something like that, And then by the second album, we had actually sat down and Hugh would come in with like, most of those songs, he would come in with a shell of an idea, mm-hmm. and, he may have music and words. He may just have words, and sometimes we would completely change the music. Mm-hmm. Other times, it would be like, I like that. Let's work with that as it is, But this time, the most recent album, I'd been talking to Hugh about it for probably a year before we actually did it, but I was like, we should make a new album. I'm tired of playing these old songs. Let's give, these people are continually coming to see us play. We should give them something new.
Yeah.
And I was bored, so I wasn't bored being in the Woodbox Gang. I was personally bored in my life and wanted to write some music with Hugh. So we talked about it, and he and Dan came to my house last summer in June. I think it was actually the same day. I think it was June 13th, the same day that we played the show, 1 year exactly later.
That's awesome.
Yeah. They came to my house and stayed there for a few days, and Hugh had a whole bunch of words that he had written. And I had been, it had been like 7 years that I had just been making up music and having no words, or I would write words and be like, this sucks, But so I had a bunch of music ideas and he had a bunch of lyrical ideas, and a lot of the songs ended up being that, where mm-hmm. he would say, well, what do you have? And I would just start, and none of them were complete songs.
Yeah.
It would be like, I've got this riff, or I've got this chord progression, or, I made up this dobro thing or whatever. And then he would look through his stuff, and what he would say, just keep playing it. And he would just like look. I think he was just looking at the meter and the rhyme schemes mm-hmm. of his lyrics, and he would find something that fit, and then he would start trying to sing it. And I think that's the first time we've ever written an album that way, and it was really fun. And like there was that one song on there called Sisyphus, and which is kind of a song about this this old man in a nursing home having this crazy dementia fantasy in his mind, imagining him and his wife doing all this crazy stuff, and it never actually really happened. It was all just in his imagination. But that song, musically, I wrote a fiddle tune. So like a fiddle tune is just like a song that has a melody that, you know, there's like reels and jigs and all these kinds of things. But it's really popular with old-timey and bluegrass bands. They'll play these songs that are based on fiddle tunes, whether they're Scottish Highland fiddle tunes, Appalachian fiddle tunes, what have you. But I really like them. They're really catchy. You know, it's usually just a melody, you know. And so I had made one up, all in a major scale, really not anything groundbreaking or unusual about it at all. And I played it for him, and I could tell that Dan and Hugh were both just like, maybe there's something there, but that is like really plain and ordinary. You know what I mean? So then I was sitting there, he was like looking through some lyrics, trying to figure something out, and I messed up. I made a mistake while I was playing it, and Dan was like, wait, do that. And so I played the mistaken note, and it made it sound all weird, like carnival-y, like really quirky sounding, you know. I was like a half step flat from the note it was supposed to be. And then for the B part of the song, it was just this crazy carnival sounding thing that went along with it, and we just kept messing around and moving. Okay, let's play this note instead of that note, and we really like just dug into it and ended up with this really crazy, like Dan's wife Cassie calls it carnival banjo, and it was like this really crazy fiddle tune, basically, is what it is, but it's played on the banjo and the mandolin. But so we took that, and then Hugh put the Sisyphus lyrics on top of that, you know. And it's funny because it kind of, to me, it almost has kind of this Pogues Irish sort of punk sound to it, you know. Yeah, so that's kind of how that one came about. But you know, there was other ones like the title track, Brown Cane Toad. That was a thing that I made up practicing my dobro. It was like just a dobro thing that I made up, and I was like, well, I play this thing sometimes, and it's a song. And then he was like, oh yeah, and so then he had words. I think he had one verse, just the first verse, and so then he sat down, and he likes to stay up all night, and like I think that's when his creative juices really start flowing. So I think he like stayed up all night while the rest of us went to bed. He like stayed up all night and like wrote more words for it and stuff. But yeah, that was the first album that we made where we did it like that the whole time. You know, every other time it was like somebody came in with an idea and then we kind of hashed it out. But this time it was like almost the majority of the songs ended up being Hugh had these words, and either I had some music, or there were some like the Nostradamus song that's on there. That one, Hugh, Dan, and I like wrote that one, the three of us sitting there, because we were just like, it sounded completely different the way we started doing it. And then it was just like, man, I want to put some like unexpected chord changes and stuff in here. Like I wanted, and I was almost thinking in my head, I wanted it to sound sort of like a Misfits song, chord progression wise, you know? And so we ended up, that song sounds like it does because of that, you know? And I'm trying to think. There was some others on there that we did something similar like that, where it was just like, I don't know, just trying to not make it so predictable musically, you know? Trying not to just do the 1-4-5 progression all the time, you know, and to throw in some weird chord changes and things like that. And some of them I can tell it's okay for me and Dan, but for Hugh, I think it's a little more challenging on the guitar because he has to play so many freaking bar chords, and I could tell he's just like, oh, you guys.
Well, it's like every time he's on stage, it's like he's just having a wrestling match with his guitar, right?
Yeah.
Like there's
beats
nothing
the
that
shit out of it.
He doesn't look like he enjoys it when he does. He looks like he has to do it to get to the art,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I love the way that you've gone through this story about how this album has come together, because I think it really speaks to, a band with a quarter century of living together.
Yeah.
I mean, that type of my words today are bad, Alex. I don't know why. It's like I've lost my vocabulary. But it's this this aspect to your guys' relationship that you can just walk in and, okay, this is your puzzle pieces are fit together because they're supposed to fit together. Like they're meant to work together like this. You guys didn't necessarily intend for this album to come together the way that it did, but guess what? Hugh was building this over here and you were building that over there, and Dan was ready to bring it in, and hey, it just so happens that we've got Nate and Max that can come around for us, and now all of a sudden it's like, hey, cool.
Yeah, and those guys have been really great to have too. Like, well, Nate, I mean, not only is he just have this amazing ability to learn songs.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how he plays with so many people and he can learn so many songs so fast.
Uh-huh.
It's crazy. I mean, sure, we've got some charts for, forgetful old men minds and stuff like that. But like, he'll learn this stuff, or, he wrote the bass lines for the new album. You know what I mean? But it's like, he's so quick at doing that stuff. But, he's also just a great guy to have around. He's a lot of fun, but he's also a really talented graphic artist.
Yeah.
So he did the album cover, the front cover art, and Hugh's partner, Heather, did some layout and design work that looked really great. And so we've got this whole graphic design team with us, and, Hugh had the idea for the album cover. We were throwing around ideas like, okay, we came up, all right, we're just going to call it Brown Cane Toad because of this song. And what's the album cover going to be? And I just thought, let's just have a picture of a brown cane toad on it, maybe with like a psychedelic background or something. Because, the brown cane toad is a poisonous frog that is like, a invasive species in Australia. It is like destroying their environment. But I guess if a dog eats the frog, it could kill the dog or something like that. But if a person licks the frog, you like trip, like hallucinogenics. So I was like, oh, what if we have this kind of like trippy psychedelic background of this cane toad? And then he was like, it needs to be something more than that, So he comes up with this whole thing of all these different references from our songs all put together in this one image. And I think between Hugh and I, we probably drove Nate about half crazy because I was like, no, let's simplify it. You're getting too complicated. And Hugh was like, but we have to have something interesting, and so we're like throwing these ideas back and forth, and poor Nate's like in the middle, just tell me what the fuck you want so I can make this album cover, and it was, I don't know. I apologized to him about it a couple times. I'm sorry, man. You are a really good artist, and I trust you, But, and then Max, I mean, he's another one. Like, Nate is a professional musician, touring experience and everything. Same thing with Max.
Yeah.
He was on tour with Reverend Peyton for something like 10 years. He's got a little studio at his house. He's got all this neat stuff. And I sent him a text and was just like, I have always wanted someone else to play the washboard in this band. Like, I wrote all these melodic parts on these stringed instruments that I can't play if I'm playing the washboard the whole night, And I've made do for many years. And it was like, I really want just somebody to play this jug bandy type percussion stuff, and would you be willing to do it? You know, he was like, well, I've never played the washboard, but I'll give it a shot, you know, and he took to it like a duck to water. I mean, he's already a great drummer anyway. But the funny thing is, everybody plays that washboard a little bit differently. You know what I mean? Like I would make gloves that I played it with that had like shotgun shells on the fingers. And like, I remember Greg Edwards, who was in our band for a long time, he played washboard at some of our shows. Nate would play bass and he would play washboard at some shows. And he actually took like the copper caps for like plumbing and glued them onto gloves. And then there was I've seen people play them with like spoons. I've seen people play them with like the little things that you open a paint can with.
Yeah.
Bottle openers, all kinds of stuff, brushes. But Max plays it with quarters. He's like up there with 2 quarters in his hand. And I was like, man, is that like giving you any kind of carpal tunnel pain or anything like that? You know, kind of concerned. I don't want him to mess himself up. Yeah. He was like, no, man, it's like strumming a guitar. I was like, awesome, dude. You know,
it works.
You do you do it the way you want to do it. I'm just glad you're willing to do it.
Yeah.
But like, he came in and he knows the feel. He's totally familiar with what we do and everything. And he's got his own record label, you know, River to River Records. And actually, I think he's working on a compilation right now, and we had one extra song that we didn't put on the album, so we're going to stick that on the compilation. Because I've always wanted to have one of our songs on the compilation anyway. So. Yeah. But yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing all the other music on there. He usually lets me master those, so I'll get to get a sneak preview of all the cool songs that he curates to put on there. You know.
Well, this will be a good enough one to kind of close us out conversationally on, because I am you talk about you mastering some of this stuff for Max. I mean, you made a pretty big jump in life from touring musician to professor of what do you consider, what are you a professor of, I guess?
Audio production.
Okay,
pretty much.
So like just going through that phase of life, having to come to terms with, you know, where the band was when he went to prison, and just having life come at you full throttle and go, oh crap, here's a lot of things that are about to change real fast.
Yeah. Well, you know, it was a real shock to the system for me. Like, you know, the same month that Hugh told us that he was going to be doing time, my wife became pregnant with our first child. And it was just like the universe screaming at me, you're going to change whether you like it or not, you know? So, like, I did. And, you know, I thought about it so much for so long. It was the hardest decision I've ever had to make, because we were a very well-established touring band at the time. Like, we had a circuit that we could go back and play. And Hugh was really encouraging us to keep playing without him. He was like, I'll just come back when I'm back.
Did you guys ever try playing without him?
We played, I think, I want to say once without him. Yeah. It was when they made that documentary about him. I think we played at the Liberty Theater.
Yep.
And I sang and played guitar. And Dan was playing dobro, mandolin, banjo. Like, he was just like, sorry, I bumped your mic.
No,
he was like doing all the, you know, changing hats, basically. And Nate played bass and Greg played percussion. But I think we only did that once that I can remember. And for that particular moment, it was okay. Yeah. But it still felt weird. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, playing without him, it just didn't, it felt weird, you know? But so anyway, I had to figure out what to do, you know? And like, I thought about, you know, my dad owned an auto body shop. I was like, I could just take the family business over,
Yeah.
you know. But I didn't really, that was never where my heart was, you know. And even though I grew up in the place, you know, I loved that place and I loved working there with my dad and everything, but I didn't really want to take it over. And, you know, I saw other things for myself, you know. And plus, by that time, I had a back injury from carrying equipment and riding in a van all the time. I had 2 herniated discs in my back, so it was like, I can't be crawling up underneath cars and picking up all this heavy stuff, you know. I can't be a physical laborer anymore. Like, I'm not going to go into my long history of jobs that I've had, but most of them were physical labor.
Yeah.
You know?
Hey, listen, they kept the music alive.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought about so many different things. I thought about maybe going to school to become an electrician. I thought about all this different stuff. And I was like, man, I just really want to be involved in studio stuff. I love the recording studio side of things. I actually like recording more than I like performing live. I sort of fell in love with it probably whenever we were making the Born with a Tail album, because we spent like 9 months in and out of the studio working on that, and I just fell in love with the process and really peeking over Mike Lascelius's shoulder and kind of like trying to learn, and he totally coached me on how to do all that stuff. You know, he was like my first recording engineer mentor, so to speak, and taught me a lot of stuff. And so then I was just like, well, I wonder if I could go to school for it, and then maybe I could get a job at a recording studio, you know? So I went to SIU and looked around and found out that they had an audio arts program in the radio television department. So I enrolled in that, did really well, and learned a lot of stuff that I didn't know, which surprised me.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of stuff that I did not know. And whenever I was going through that, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do when I graduated. And because I already had a degree partly finished anyway, so I wasn't going to, it was only going to take me like 2 years to get done. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, my son was born by then, you know, and it was just like, oh man, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And so I went to, they have a Nashville class, and I went down to Nashville, and I talked to some people down there, and they said, well, we had to give this presentation in the Nashville class about some kind of a career thing. And I gave a presentation on, I want to be your intern at this recording studio. Because that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. I
wanted to work at a recording studio. I knew the only way in was to be an intern. And the guy was like, I can totally get you an internship at Blackbird Studio if you want to, which is like, I think, one of the biggest studios in Nashville. And I was like, man, wouldn't that be awesome? And then I started thinking, by that time, my daughter was born. I have an infant and a toddler and a wife and a mortgage. How am I going to be an intern in Nashville? I can't do this. I could have done this 5 years ago, but I can't do this now.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be a college professor. I'm just going to go to grad school. Like, I talked to Jenny Johnson's mom, Phyllis, about it, and she was super helpful and was just like, you don't need a PhD. What you need is an MFA, and we have an MFA program here that you would be perfect for. And so I enrolled in the MFA program and did really well in that, really enjoyed it. And like my last year of grad school, I just started applying for jobs. And I'm not kidding you. I still have the spreadsheet. I applied for 100 jobs. And I got interviews for about 7. And I got one offer, and it wasn't a good offer, so I didn't take it because I have a family. I have to be given a living wage from the day one, or I'm not doing it, you know? And so I went to Noteworthy Studio, and I was working up there for it was beautiful displays. I was like helping them print and stuff for a while. And I ended up sitting in my bed at midnight one night, and John Plascota called me I was like, what is he calling me at midnight for, you know? And I answered the phone, and he was like, you still looking for a job? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, how do you feel about living in Missouri? I was like, I live in Illinois. That's the freaking difference,
Yeah, right.
you know? Which, now that I've been there, there's a big difference.
Right.
But I didn't know it at the time. So anyway, he was like, well, there's this place where I used to teach, and their audio professor left, and they want a new audio professor. They need somebody in August. And this was in like, I want to say June, late May or June. And I was like, oh my God, the short notice is going to kill me, you know?
Yeah.
So I sent him my CV. He sent it to them. They contacted me like the next day, I think. I talked to him. Then the whole faculty from the department did a Skype with me. That was before Zoom, I think.
Back when Skype existed. No.
Yeah. And then they had me come out on campus, and they offered me the job the day I came out there. Like they knew I have a family.
Yep.
They meant business.
Yep.
And they made me a really good offer that was way better than any offer that I'd had.
Yeah.
And the cost of living was low there, so I took it. And ever since then, I've been a college professor, and I really like it, man. It's like my students come in, and they're not, you know, some of them aren't super motivated, but a lot of them are, because I don't teach gen ed classes.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
I'm not teaching
You're in a specialty.
Psych 101 or whatever. Like, so the classes I teach are in a major, so they're interested in it, you know, most of them. So they come in and they make great work, and they apply themselves, and they've kind of kept me up to date on newer music and things like that. Sometimes they'll gift me CDs and stuff like that. Like I had one student who did a foreign exchange thing last year, and he was in Birmingham, England. And I had to do a little bit of extra work to help him figure things out, because it's a pretty complicated thing for a 19 or 20-year-old person to try to navigate. I'm going to another country.
Yeah, right.
You know, but you know, it's part of my job. I didn't think anything of it, but he like really appreciated it. So he knew I loved music. So while I was over there, he like bought a bunch of CDs of the music that was popular there at that time and gave it to me. And he knew that I loved Black Sabbath, and Black Sabbath is from Birmingham.
Yep.
So he like took some pictures of the Black Sabbath bench or whatever, but he also gave me a Geezer Butler solo CD, which was really cool. But he gave me this CD. It was this green CD, like a green screen color, and it said Brad on it. And I was like, what the hell is this? You know, is this like a punk band or something? I put it on. It was totally like this rave music by like Charlie XCX or something like that. And I guess it was like the biggest freaking record in the world, and I didn't even know. But
hilarious.
That kind of stuff, like, now I know who that is.
Yeah.
And it's important that I do know, because I can't use my generation's music as examples for teaching people that are so much younger than me. You know, they're less than half my age, you know, like I'm 30 or more years older than the students, you know? So it's like, I can't be like, well, if you want to record somebody who's got a raspy voice like Rod Stewart, you should use this kind of microphone, because they don't know who Rod Stewart is. You know what I mean? So, you know, I have to use modern examples of things, and they keep me on that. And plus I'm the academic advisor for the student radio station.
Nice.
So they're always playing newer music on there and stuff like that. So I hear a lot of it, and some of it's pretty cool and interesting. And then, you know, just like any other time, there's some stuff that's really annoying. Like there was this one song that was in steady rotation. It was called God's Plan by Drake. I hate that song. That song is the most uncreative, boring pop song I think I've ever heard. And it was just like they kept playing it, so I snuck in there one day and like deleted it out of our music folder, because I was just like, I can't hear this again. It seemed like every time I turned the station on, it was on there. So I had to get rid of that one. But most of the time, though, I'll hear stuff and I'll be like, oh, that's pretty catchy, you know, or that's clever, you know, or that's an interesting production choice that they made in that song, you know. And I throw all that stuff into my lessons, But I really like doing it, man. It's super cool. But this has been the most unmusical period of my entire life.
Yeah.
Because I have no band there.
Yeah.
Like,
Ooh,
there's no music scene where I live.
Okay.
The nearest real music scene is 90 minutes away.
Oof.
I don't have time to participate in that.
Yeah.
So it's like, I have to come here to get my rocks off, It's like, so this whole idea of making an album was just like, well, the recording will take this much time and blah, blah, blah. But then I'll be mixing it. It took me like a few months to get that thing mixed, because, well, for one thing, we kept adding stuff to it. But, it was like, it kept me busy in a way that I like to be busy.
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm spending time being creative on my own stuff, and I don't know. It felt really good. And now I feel like we're kind of re-energized, and we've already been talking about writing more songs and making more recordings. But I will say this, I don't know if everybody in the band agrees with me or not, but I don't, in this day and age, I don't really think we should make an old-fashioned album anymore. I kind of feel like we should write a handful of songs, put everything we got into them, and then just put them out like an EP, put them out digitally, and then make like a 7-inch at 33 1/3 RPM so you could put 4 songs on it. You just put those out, and then do it more often maybe, instead of trying to take on 10, 12, 15 songs. Like, I just don't think that, I think our audience in our generation will still sit down and listen to a whole entire album. But I kind of feel like younger people don't consume music that way anymore.
So when I was talking with you and my nudge to him, right, you'd see the studio we're in here. I don't have a musical bone in my body. I would never advise somebody to take advice from me when it comes to music broadly.
Yeah.
But I guess this is kind of music advice, whatever. Anyway, that you guys have a catalog of material that, again, timeless, ever relevant in a contemporary music setting, right? A combination of that existing catalog and what you might do with it to recycle it through a modern media environment, i.e. YouTube, TikTok, etc., right? Pointed back to Spotify and redistributed to your individual channels and what have you, right? But combining that with the methodology of consistent small-scale production as opposed to all-in-one blast, right? Because you could take 4 songs every 3 to 6 months and make those something that draws in your existing audience and broadens your audience base as well, right? And I brought up Jesse Wells as an example when I was talking to Hugh, but not as applicable as a different band, just a small.
He's the folk singer songwriter guy, right?
Yeah. And he's
done some really clever songs. He's entertaining,
and the way that he churns them out, man. I don't know if he's using AI to generate his stuff or not, but dear God, the guy's a machine.
Yep.
Right. If something happens, he's got a song about it within 4 hours.
Yeah.
It's wild. And it turns out that guy he's a metal guy. Like if you see his old stuff, and there's several folks in town. He's from Arkansas. There's several folks in town that have known him, have been around him, have played with him. He's not an untouchable entity from here. But there's another band. There's a California band that I got some content served to me from maybe about 3-4 months ago. The guy's handle is Mattstagram, and maybe that's the band name, maybe it's not. But what they did was they had they had a viral hook for one of their songs, and they just beat the crap out of it for 45 days, right, to the release of a song, and then they cycle back to that same hook and the same pushback to the song for another 30 days. Off of one song, right, they probably made 40, 50 different pieces of content, all pointed back to the single. And I'm not saying that that's the same way you guys ought to or should. I'm just saying there's a balance between Jesse Wells putting out a song every other day about the most contemporary thing that's happening, and some guys over here that are pushing one single song over and over and over again for 3 months straight with the same hook and whatever else. There's a middle ground that I see that works really nicely for you guys, where, okay, you've got a blend of several different songs that are most, that are your newest items, right, that you're pushing back to, but then you've also got all of the existing supporting catalog that, again, relevant material that can draw people in. It's like, I can't tell you how you should structure it, because I'm not a Woodbox Gang aficionado, as many folks are, but there's something there in the vast amount of content that you guys already have, and your guys want to continue pushing this forward, right? And the realities of the modern media and music environment that we exist in, that, like, your guys' time is not over, right? Like, the spotlight for the Woodbox Gang may be dimmed, like, in a certain way, right? But it has not gone out, and it is by no means over, right? And all it takes is one. Dakota Holden played the Tonight Show a couple nights ago, man.
He was just on the Howard Stern show too.
Was he really?
Yeah.
Good God.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, we're breathing some rarefied air here in Carbondale still.
Yeah.
You guys are central to that. You guys are core to that. You guys are a bridge between the what has been and the what will be and the what is in the here and now. And I'm so thrilled to hear you talk about your intentions in such a way, right? Hugh's mindset in our interview was very much like, I don't want these guys that I feel like I caused them to miss out on something in life to not miss that opportunity, right? So he's got that part of the mindset. But then there's you guys coming in, you're going, no, this is how we want to create, this is how we want to move it forward, right? The energy of your interests, what Hugh wants to put into it, the excitement of having a Max, right? Max is like a kid playing with his idols right now, right? when you watch the video,
that'll wear off soon.
Well, you think, buddy, right? I mean, it took him 10 years to get tired of Road Dogg. But I mean, watching him play drums and sing along with every bit of his heart behind Hugh during the show, right? Like, and I only watched maybe 30, 40-second clip of it, but like, I noticed it. I was like, oh my gosh, like, Max is just swinging his hair and he's singing, he's going, anyway, I'm doing all this rambling to say, I really see you guys are in this perfect storm position, right? You understand what you're doing. You understand the environment in which you operate, the catalog, the interest moving forward, the right place, right time stuff. Like, this is exciting, right?
I just really want to make music that is fun to play, that people who like our band will enjoy, and I think it would be fun to explore ways to use social media to give them more entertaining things from our music. I just don't think that any of us are expert social media makers.
Yeah.
I don't teach that, I can make the audio sound really good in our TikToks, but you know what I mean? Like, I think we should probably, like sort of related to what you're talking about, I think it'd be great if we worked with somebody or some people who were interested in making social media videos that could help us make some things that are entertaining. Because, like, Hugh made one that I thought was probably the funniest thing that we'd ever put on social media, but he made up a TikTok dance for the song where he says Fox News is not CBS, and he had a little dance for it. It was like, it was like, Fox News is Nazi BS.
Oh man.
And it was just so funny, especially seeing him do it. Like, man, it just cracked me up. Well, and I was like, we should do more. I don't know. I'm entertained by really goofy stuff like that.
But that's the type of stuff, right? And once you have one break in, right, there's enough substance there for people to go down that discovery rabbit hole, right? We talked about, the kids curating and being DJs and the value in that side of stuff. That's what you guys have to offer to this world, right? Is like a lot worth discovering.
And if AI comes along and steals my professor job away from me, what am I going to do? I'll make TikToks for the Woodbox Gang. It's like, jeez. But I haven't tried it yet, but have you ever heard of the AI that'll generate songs?
I've seen. I'm so down the consumption. I
think it'd be fun to see if AI could write a Woodbox Gang song. It would be funny because I don't think, like, we're definitely on the internet, but I don't know if our web presence is huge enough to do like I heard somebody did a Nirvana song and it actually sounded like a Nirvana song, and I've heard a few other examples of that of really, really huge legendary artists, but nobody that's like this kind of fringe underground weird thing like us,
Well, the other thing that you could find yourself doing, Alex, and this may be the pet project that you walk away with to run through the rest of the summer with, right? And I mean, the other thing is like your access to your students allows you to learn from them, right? When they're bringing new stuff through and I haven't really fiddled with this yet. Like, teach me, child.
Yeah.
But if you were to run an AI audio system locally on a piece of hardware that you have at home, and just plug all of your guys' albums into it and say, here, artificial intelligence, listen to us.
Like, I don't want AI to write I don't want AI to make art.
Yeah.
I want AI to mow my yard and go grocery shopping for me.
Do the dishes.
That kind of stuff. But I still think that it's interesting. Like, whenever we were trying to come up with ideas for the album cover, we were running all kinds of crap through AI just to get kind of like ideas.
Yep.
But none of them looked the way that we wanted it to. And then Nate came up and actually drew something himself that, yes, this is good. You know what I mean? But like, I wouldn't want to be like, oh, we just released 4 songs that were totally written by AI. Like, I'm not going to do that. No. But I just kind of wonder if AI could get it right. You know what I mean? Because Hugh has a particular cleverness and sensibility in his music and a peculiar way of looking at the world that's kind of the way that he expresses himself through his songs, but it's really relatable.
Yeah. And
like, it's a special thing about him, that I've really never seen in anybody else that I've ever played with, so it's like, I don't really think that a computer could be that. I don't really think AI could be that. I do think that AI could mow my yard, though. Get to it.
And that's our break-in, a conversation that AI could not have had here on this 119th episode of the WTF Carbondale podcast. A thank you to Alex Kirt for making the time and for being another leg of our Woodbox Gang series here on the podcast. Have a good one, folks, whatever that one may be.